Rangers won the Scottish Premier League 5 times between 2003 and 2011, as well as reaching the final of the UEFA Cup in 2008, which on the face of it was an impressive achievement as the club went toe-to-toe with resurgent Celtic during that period. To compete with Celtic, however, the club was prepared to take steps that would ultimately lead to its liquidation and its demotion to the Scottish 3rd Division. It would take 4 years out of the top flight before the club was once again able to face its rivals in a league match. The high-profile recruitment of Steven Gerrard as manager in the summer of 2018 has whetted the appetite of fans and pundits, but is the club a phoenix from the ashes, or are its new foundations made of sand? During the 1990s, Rangers were the dominant force in Scottish football. The wealth of owner David Murray allowed the club to recruit the likes of Paul Gascoigne, Tore-André Flo, Brian Laudrup and Mo Johnston, and the club won 9 titles in a row. Murray claimed, "For every £5 we will spend 10, and the dynasty seemed unstoppable, but it was built on debt. Celtic were, however, improving their finances thanks to the backing of Irish billionaire Dermot Desmond. With managers such as Wim Jansen and Martin O'Neill, the battle for supremacy in the Scottish game became more balanced on the field, and the investment in the infrastructure at Celtic Park, plus more regular progress in the UEFA competitions, meant that the club's income was ahead of that of their rivals. Because Celtic were generating more money in the early 2000s, it meant that they could sign better players to compete with their rivals in terms of recruitment. Rangers during this period were generating large losses as they had a smaller capacity stadium and were generating less matchday income. The only way to underwrite these losses was to borrow money, which the club did with enthusiasm, such that by June 2004, Rangers owed £74 million to financial institutions. Behind the scenes, Rangers were also trying to compete with Celtic by some creative tax activities. This involved the creation of the Employee Benefit Trusts, where the club paid money into a trust. The EBT then lent money to players who in theory promised to pay it back, but there was no or little effort to ask for that money back from players, who effectively therefore treated it as regular income. The advantage to Rangers in taking this approach was that the club did not pay national insurance contributions on the payments to the players, who also did not pay income tax on these loans from the trusts. The players were happy because they ended up with the net pay they were seeking, so everyone was a winner, well, apart from the government. This policy worked to the extent that Rangers won the Scottish Premier League 5 times from 2003 to 2011, but critics will argue that they were abusing the tax system in the process, and those titles were at best tainted and at worst should have been stripped from the club's list of trophies. The global financial crash of 2007, created by the financial community who lent money to the people and businesses who had no ability to repay the sums advanced, hit Rangers in 2 ways. Owner David Murray's business struggled, and so was unable to provide the club with further financial support, and the main bank lender, the Royal Bank of Scotland, effectively went into public ownership following its own financial meltdown, and there was a far less relaxed approach towards Rangers from the bank's new senior management as a result. Furthermore, the UK tax authorities became increasingly unhappy with Rangers' use of EBTs, which had been originally sanctioned for non-employees, which was not the case in the respect of the club and its players. The tax authorities saw the approach taken by the club as a form of tax evasion and pursued the club for a tax bill of up to £49 million. An increasingly desperate David Murray therefore sold the club to Craig White for just £1, who promised to settle the tax issues and the bank loans, but White did neither. And as more and more creditors were issuing writs for unpaid debts, the club appointed administrators in February 2012. This angered HMRC, who had wanted to appoint their own administrators to investigate Rangers' affairs, and so HMRC refused to agree to a deal with the administrators, leading to Rangers going into liquidation, provoking a constitutional crisis in Scottish football. A new company, Sevco Scotland, was set up and bought Rangers' assets from the liquidator, although players were allowed to leave the club for free as technically their contracts were with the old club. Other SPL clubs voted that Sevco, now called Rangers Football Club Limited, was not allowed to take the place of Rangers in the top flight, and instead the newly formed company was invited to join the Scottish 3rd Division. Rangers had income of £19 million in 2012-13 in the Scottish 3rd Division, which was more than double that of the other 9 teams in the division combined. And Rangers had similar success in the Scottish 2nd Division the following season. During this time, Rangers was falling further and further behind Celtic in terms of generating income and signing players, which meant that when Rangers were finally promoted to the SPFL and had their first season there in 2016-17, they generated only a third of the revenue of Celtic. And the club have also returned to using debt as a means of funding, although as there is great suspicion from banks towards the club, the lending is almost exclusively from directors. At the last count, Rangers owed lenders £21 million in June 2018, although subsequently some of this has been written off as lenders converted the IOUs from the club, which some consider to be worthless, into shares instead. The arrival of Steven Gerrard has introduced a feel-good factor to the club, and there were £1 million plus signings such as Barisic, Goldson and Murphy, along with loans from Liverpool as Stevie G used his contact book to try and improve the quality of the playing squad. The club is now competing with their rivals in an SPFL that has greater uncertainty than has been seen for many years. For this to be achieved, the board has admitted that it will need a further £4.6 million to survive this season and has gone cap in hand to investors for extra funds. The recent elimination from the Europa Cup will not have helped Rangers' financial woes, and in addition, largest shareholder Dave King seems to spend more time in court arguing with the likes of Mike Ashley and the takeover panel, who believe he should buy out the remaining shareholders than focusing on issues on the pitch. Whether King has the wealth he claims to buy those shares is as yet unproven, as are many issues in relation to the club's activities. Furthermore, there are squabbles and threats of litigation between the administrators, liquidators, former owners, HMRC and former players, which could result in large sums being payable by some of them. But the only guarantee is that the lawyers, as always, will be rich on the pickings of the disputes between these parties.